We are basically teaching critical thinking and how to move into making your decisions. Are you going to be kind with somebody, or are you going to shut them down? And that's the dilemma that we are now in right now, is that these are complicated times, and they require us to really stop and think about how you're moving through the world and what governs your personal decisions on a moment-to-moment basis.
Disinformation is spreading.
There will be a surprise outbreak. Is the issue of pandemic.
No social distancing at all.
They said that they would express their concerns about the mask supply.
Where's the mask? Where's the glove?
A second wave is
we all need some good news.
This is a message for all the healthcare workers out there.
Thank you.
If you're looking for hope tonight, raise your hand. If you feel alone and don't understand, if you're fighting the fight of your life, then stand.
From Santa Rosa, California, this is 19 Stories. I'm your host, Cheryl Halling. It's been a minute since our last episode, and as we step into a new year, it's clear that for so many of us, things haven't quite gone as planned. And in particular, I'm referring to friends and family in Los Angeles who are grappling with the aftermath of the devastating fires, and to those facing social, environmental, and political challenges. I've recently returned from attending the 11th Annual Podfest Expo in Orlando, Florida, and as a first-time attendee, I am reinvigorated and more committed than ever to bringing you authentic, inspiring, and hope-filled stories. A heartfelt thank you to Chris Krimitsos, the visionary and founder behind Podfest, for creating an event built on education, collaboration, and community. It's a place where, as he says, your voice matters, reminding us all to use our words and energy wisely. It's no small coincidence, then, that my first guest of 2025 has built her business and personal mission on teaching both children and adults the fundamentals of kindness and collaboration, attributes that appear to be in short supply these days. And yet, as my experience at Podfest just proved, these qualities can exist given the right leadership, nurturing, and creativity. And speaking of nurturing and creativity, my guest, Sandra Beckwith, is all of the embodiment of these qualities and so much more. She's the author of numerous ebooks, 10 and counting, and is a passionate advocate for civility with her Master Keys for Kids, a collection aiming to instill kindness, respect, gratitude, and compassion in our youth. These fundamental values, though seemingly very scarce today, are essential for nurturing a more respectful and empathetic society. Its companion series of character tales, A Manner for All Seasons, is a second release of what's soon to be a trilogy of living into your life purpose, and serves as a tool for families, classrooms, and faith communities. Sandra's program, Return to Civility, uses theater skills to teach empathy and emotional intelligence, encouraging kids to engage in meaningful interactions. Beyond her work with children, Sandra is the creator of Your Life as a Masterpiece, a process aimed at helping individuals discern their life purpose and set personal goals. Soon to be available in ebook form, this course invites us to reflect on the art of living intentionally. And I had the great opportunity to be one of Sandra's first students years ago when we were both living in Los Angeles. Join us as we explore Sandra's insights and learn how we can all contribute to a kinder, more respectful world. Whether you're a parent, teacher, or simply someone who cares about the next generation, I trust there's something valuable you can take away from this conversation. Sandra Beckwith, welcome to 19 Stories.
Cheryl, thank you for that exceptionally kind introduction. I'm going to have to live up to that in the next time together. Oh, gracious, you set the bar, my dear.
Well, I think you've got the bar on kindness, because this is what we're all about. That's what we're going to be talking about. And I was so delighted that you're here with me today, as there's been a lot of years in life that's happened since we've last seen each other. And although you and I are both no longer living in Los Angeles, I really want to extend my condolences to you, as I know you have a deep history with Pacific Palisades as a former resident, teacher, congregant, and singer in that community.
Thank you, Cheryl. I really, really do appreciate that. And empathy is so much at the heart of what we're talking about today. I read something very interesting this morning about Conan Bryan, and he was talking about that this is a time for us to really be sensitive to one another and to deeply listen. So we'll start out by talking about that or aiming in that direction, because that's, again, at the heart of empathy is, do we care enough and can we extend ourselves to be able to kindly listen to one another?
To which I will give you an early amen. I have at least one in my podcast, but I think you're starting out with amen to that. LA has gotten a bad rap in some ways because of people seeming to be indifferent. And yet there's a saying, and it's actually scriptural, that what the enemy means for harm, God means for good. And I think the goodness that's coming out of this is showing that humanity, no matter where you live, whether it's LA or where, and I would love for you to tell our listeners where you're residing, but it's universal. When there's a crisis, it either brings out the best in people, or conversely, the opposite. So where are you residing these days?
I am in Oregon, where all the rain came up here. And it's lovely and green and beautiful with sweet, friendly people. And there are sweet, friendly people in Los Angeles, as there are in all other cities. And that's our challenge, is to look deeper and to see the humanity in one another and to understand that we don't know everybody's story. There's lots of information we can't see. So if we can start our interactions with one another by just simply being kind.
Yes, absolutely. And we're going to talk more about that. But I love to begin by having my guests talk about their story of origin. As you have an extensive background in theater arts, and you may still be, I don't know. You were a touring member of the world-renowned Roger Wagner Chorale.
Yes, I've had the privilege of going to Japan a number of times with that group of tremendous excellence. It's been a privilege, and I have developed a very deep relationship and adoration of Japan.
I remember the beautiful kimonos you used to bring back.
I still do. We all have our collections, don't we?
So are you still touring with them?
I have, yes.
Wonderful.
I wasn't able to go last spring, but otherwise it's been the last 25 years.
That's amazing.
It is.
That is
a privilege.
Amazing.
And a deep privilege.
Well, that's a testament to your talent. And you've also appeared on the Grammys as a backup singer for Christina Aguilera.
Yes, I'm the one with the big hair in the background.
Well, we got to make our mark and stand out somehow.
Well, we had all this to do about what we were going to wear and makeup, and spent hours and hours doing it. And then they filmed us with fog coming up, and I was in a black choir robe. So, oh well.
Yeah, but people recognize you by your and it was beautiful. I remember that performance. It was just gorgeous.
It's one of my favorite pieces of hers. She's a deeply talented person.
As are you, my dear. And
again, kind. Thank you.
Well, I'm on good behavior today. I have to be.
Me too.
I'm with Miss Manners. So I want to know how all that experience led you into creating the tools we're about to talk about.
What a good question. So often when these things happen, we think we're just falling into something, but in actuality, you've been preparing your whole life. And yes, I'm a performer in my background, but I'm sure you'll agree with this, that what an actor does is they learn to tell the truth. They also learn to deeply listen. Those are the most basic skills of any performer, whether it's a singer or frankly a dancer or anything, is that are you living in the moment and are you telling the truth? So I was teaching summer program for almost 2 decades at a school in Los Angeles, and the principal came to me and said, "Do you know anybody who teaches etiquette?" And at the time I thought, well, I can figure that out.
That's such an interesting question, though. You don't hear teachers asking that all the time.
It is more and more in demand as people are understanding that these skills carry you into the job market. They carry you into all your interpersonal relationships. How long do you keep a job? And all sorts of things are dependent on these skill sets, as well as your long-term relationships and how you operate in the world. So yeah, it's becoming more and more important, as our social skills in general. So I figured it out, created a curriculum, and then I started in thinking I was only teaching etiquette. And within the first month, discovered that etiquette is only the outcome of your personal ethics. In other words, how do you treat people? What are the basic building blocks of how you approach your ethics in life. And that's where I started to dig deep and had to figure out, well, what's universal about this? What is cross-cultural about this? And I came up with, I think it kind of all reduces down to kindness, respect, gratitude, and compassion. It didn't seem to matter what religion, it didn't seem to matter what country. It kept boiling down to those four things of how we move through life and how we, what, if you will, what our moral compass is. So they became master keys because it was originally called Open Doors, Closed Doors, because the premise is, will how you treat someone else open a door with them, or will it close a door with them? And that was something that seemed to translate very well. I taught K through 8th, and it didn't matter what age it was for the kids. That simple principle. I even shook keys in the classroom to remind them as, are you opening a door? Are you closing a door? We are basically teaching critical thinking and how to move into making your decisions. Are you going to be kind with somebody, or are you going to shut them down? And that's the dilemma that we are now in right now, is that these are complicated times and they require us to really stop and think about how you're moving through the world and what governs your personal decisions on a moment-to-moment basis.
It's almost like living into improv.
Yeah, very much.
Where the yes and.
Yes.
Because if you shut people down, that's it. That's the end of it. There's no more dialogue. Whereas if you are yes and, let's discuss. And so you have these master keys for kids. Civility Matters, A Manner for All Seasons. I love the titles.
Thank you.
Of each series. And they're pretty self-explanatory. But let's talk about the lessons you cover in each one.
Sure. The first one that came about, and these were the lessons that I was teaching kids and how it all evolved, is Master Keys for Kids. And that's a collection of 6 books where I took the basic principles and then put them in selections so that people could look at things through collections. So, for example, in the first book, The Basics, we talk about stress relief and table manners and the basic principles of what I call royal manners. Now, your folks will have fun listening to this. Royal manners are when you're on your best behavior, but this was hard to translate to kids. So I put it down to, well, how would you act in front of the king and queen? And the kids got it. And so we talk about royal manners and casual manners, and it seemed to be a nice way to be able to share that with families and friends. Collection of respect. So there might be phone manners, or the art of listening, or how respecting your elders. Or in the book of self-respect, it's building character, or how to make an apology. That's a big one. That's a big one to carry you through life. I've got a series on anger. A lot of kids dealing with that and their feelings. So we go through kindness and gratitude and different, and what compassion is. That's a little complicated to explain to kids what that means. So we try to break that down. These lead conversations, and the lessons can be used especially if you're starting to initiate what might be a challenging conversation, like lying or failure, things like that. Then the lessons are very helpful in that.
So I'm going to jump right in by asking you, given the current political divide in our country, how do you even talk to people about why civility, manners, kindness, and respect are so important right now, given the deterioration of these values in our nation's leaders and that their behavior is counter to these attributes?
Well, that's the big question right now, isn't it?
Yeah, that's why I'm asking you, because I'm already on board with what you're all about, and yet I would imagine there might be some pushback or people saying, "Well, good luck with that," because in some ways it seems like it's brushing your hair in the wind because you're doing all this great work,
Yeah.
and then someone who is of import, if you will, as far as our leader, will come along and negate these wonderful things that you're teaching. So can you speak to that for a moment?
Thank you for asking that, Cheryl. And I just want to acknowledge, I think it's a really tough time to be a kid, and I think it's a really tough time to be a parent. for those
Yes.
very reasons that the world is not necessarily modeling what it is that we might believe are strong guiding principles. So, so let's talk about that. So, the act of choosing civility and acting with respect. Okay, some really good reasons. Your long-term relationships are governed by how you treat one another. Okay, that's a good reason to be looking at why is this so important? For you as a human being, it produces a high quality of life for you. On the bigger picture, when we are kind and respectful with one another, well, there's a reduction or a reversal of conflict. I open the headlines of any day of the week and you will see where's our conflict coming from? How is it increasing? We're not listening to one another. We are not valuing the experience of the other person. So reduction of conflict, whether it's for you as an individual or in the larger picture at your place of work or your child at school, and watch the conflict rise and rise if we're not listening to one another. So yeah, in a big picture, this is very much at the heart of all diplomacy is how well do you listen and do you care about what's happening on the other end? Do you care?
That's a key word, I think. Do you care?
Do you care?
I'm sure you might run into that. People who don't care.
All day, every day.
Then what do you do with that?
Well, here again, this is so hard, isn't it, my friends? It is really hard because there's a lot of information that we don't have about another human being or another culture or another country. We don't know what their day-to-day life is like, the challenges and the burdens that they carry. We don't know what their childhoods were like. So we are coming into a relationship with only what we can see, but it's much deeper than that. So can you take a moment and give, before you react to somebody, respond, take a breath and go, let me just listen to them and know that there's information that I don't have. So let me care enough about the person on the other end and care enough about my stress level that I want to reduce this potential conflict and just listen and then respond.
So I'm curious, are there times, I will say for myself, I believe there are, where you weigh the cost and say, it's clear this person is not invested in this relationship, this work, whatever environment it is. And maybe it's just time to let go in grace.
You said the key, to let go in grace. Are there toxic relationships in our life? Yup. Everybody's going to be dealing with that. Again, we don't know what created that, but it also doesn't mean that you have to put up with that either. Can we release that with forgiveness for that person for whatever created that, and then be gentle and kind to yourself and not put yourself through that? Yeah.
Yes.
And wish them well. So it's the difference, Cheryl, I would say, between passing judgment on someone and being able to discern what's really going on with that. So, and being able to operate on your own. There again, it comes back to open doors, closed doors, because I used to even say this to the kids. There are times when you close a door with someone and it is prudent to do so. It's the difference is the judgment that's being done with it. And are you condemning that person for circumstances that you don't know about? And that's the big, if you will, spiritual question that comes along with this of like, God. And by the way, my friends, this is hard. It's hard. One of the hardest things we have to do is to navigate in a world that is sometimes pretty mean to us. It's always about how are you going to respond to that? Forgiveness and non-judgment also releases you from the toxicity of whatever was going on. So it yes. Always is a gift to yourself, and don't leave yourself hostage expecting their behavior to change. My friends, can we get real here?
I'm doing a finger snap. Yes.
Yeah. Let's do that. But truly, my friends, if you're waiting for something to change on the other end, the person who's in prison the longest is the warden.
That's a bumper sticker.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
And if you hold on to those resentments and those judgments, you are locking the prison cell. So there's lots of reasons besides just what some people call soft skills. I think that undersells what we're talking about. I think these are the real core issues in life. But are you somebody that can move ahead in the world untethered by what the hurts and the brokenness of other people and still oh yeah, if this were easy, we'd be in a different place as a culture, but it's not.
We wouldn't be having this conversation.
We wouldn't that be lovely? And we could be talking about chocolate or something something else that's universal.
Well, you've touched on the fact that you've had a teacher come up to you and ask you, do you teach etiquette? And yet teachers are leaving in record numbers, a profession they often have a deep passion for. And so how important is it to involve educational institutions in the character building process for children without, the caveat is, without expecting them to take on the role of a parent?
It takes a village, doesn't it, to raise children?
Yep.
It's a core tenet with Master Keys for Kids. And I should say it's my deep hope as well, but it's built into the structure of it that this can be shared by classrooms and by families. So they could actually be reinforcing the lessons and the topics on both ends. It's not an adversarial role of teachers to parents, which it is in many places. We want to be working together and not expect that one end is going to have the whole raising of a child. We all do this. And may I just also say, they're all our children. All of them are our children, whether they're your biological children or not.
Yes.
They're all our children. So aren't we all invested? I personally am an auntie and I adore it. And this is also taught from the perspective of an auntie as opposed to someone who is parenting. And I think that's an important distinction. An auntie stands between two worlds. An auntie can talk to children and children can open up to them in ways that they're not worried about the parent coming down on them, that there's going to be punishment. An auntie can then turn around and talk to the parents and say, this is what your kids are feeling. Just want you to know, and be the liaison between the two. Both in the structure of how this is written and also the main characters that I have in my books, especially my main character, Madama.
Which we're going to talk about in a moment.
That's my next she's question. So much fun. I'll see if she's in, if she wants to come talk to you.
Okay.
But we want to be able to bring both sides together and facilitate conversation and try to figure this out together, because what we're teaching is critical thinking.
Sometimes parents are so preoccupied and invested that it takes someone who's neutral. I mean, not that we don't care, but it's just that we're neutral. And sometimes we see things that parents don't. So you mentioned Madama and her pet peeves, which I think is a brilliant name. How did those characters come about in being the facilitator in sharing these stories versus you, Sandra, in the first person?
That's such a great question. And I'm going to be very honest with you. This is such a funny story. When I was first teaching drama to kids that we mentioned before, I had all these characters, and I had some of the classes were larger than other classes. So I ran out of characters and costumes and all sorts of things. And I had to, on the spot, make up a character so that I had enough for this particular class. That's the truth. And all I had left was this large gold strange hat and some evening gloves and a boa. And so on the spot, I said, and we've got a king, we've got a queen, but you can be the royal party planner. You're Madama Floozy. That's how she.
Madama Floozy.
Yeah, that was her original one, and it changed later to Flouzé.
Okay, that's
for obvious reasons.
Yeah,
it amused me in the moment to have a Floozy, but for years the kids then fought over who was going to play her. So I had this fun character, and when I began writing this, and during the year, all those costumes were stored up in my attic. And I'm like, I need some kind of central way to talk to kids that isn't about scolding or, how do you talk about manners in a way that's not dry, that's going to be accessible and fun to them. And I swear to you, up in the attic in a muffled voice coming out of the costume boxes is Madame Fluzet, who's saying, Bonjour, bonjour, mes amis, here I am. Come on, my darling, I've been with you for many years. It's time for me to come out of the box.
I love it.
And here she comes with her pet peeves. So Madama talks about things, she makes commentary. She's a time traveler, and she comes from another century, France, actually, 1795. I don't know why.
You're being very specific.
Oh, no, she told me. I didn't.
Okay.
Trust me.
Okay.
Trust me. And there's no negotiating that with her. When she first came through, and she said, this is my background. And it was fascinating. But there's something very profound in that, is she's making commentary on the points of manners and decorum and how we treat one another that we don't want to lose and we want to bring forward. And then taking a look at deeper questions of how our behavior affects other people, which is her pet peeves. And then, of course, the dog also has peeves, has all sorts of commentary on his own, including the vocabulary. I don't dumb down any of the vocabulary on it. Peeves comes forward with his own definitions of it. Kids are really smart, and they'll figure out new words, and it's a good thing.
Yeah.
It is a good thing. We're giving them new colors to play with by having wonderful language. So there she was. She'd been with me for years. I did not know that then she came forward and said, this is the real reason I'm here. And I want to come forward and help you to talk about creating a kinder, more respectful world. So I give her center stage. And when I wrote her backstory, which is one of the books in A Manner for All Seasons, why manners and respect are so important to Madama, then it comes forward. She shares all. It was one of the strangest writing experiences I've ever had, because I literally sat across the table with my computer on one side. I put a chair on the other side. She sits down opposite me and tells me her story. And she dictated it. And I went, really? Oh, what was your name? I didn't know that was your first name. Oh, you were a milliner. I didn't know that either. Where are you from? What year? And it all just came right out.
It's a beautiful insight into the whole process of writing and character development that we don't think about. That, we've seen it in film after film after film of a writer sitting down with writer's block and looking at that blank piece of paper and waiting for the muse to show up. And she did. And I think what you described is kind of a perfect transition into a question that I debated asking you, but I think it's really important in light of everything that you just shared, because school shootings often reveal a history of bullying. Mm-hmm. And I know that now more than ever, society is more open to talking about the detriments of bullying, especially since cyberbullying is a thing that you and I didn't have to worry about when we were growing up. Thank God. So what role does empathy and emotional intelligence play in preventing issues like bullying and improving mental health among students? And do you address these issues in your materials?
Yes, on multiple levels. It's such a deep question, isn't it? And there's so much pain involved, and there are no simple answers to this.
And I didn't expect one. Yeah.
No, nor did I think you were asking that. But I just wanted everybody to take a deep breath on this one, because it's not simple. But there are years of woundedness and brokenness that goes into, I think, creating bullies. And there are, they have been mocked by their peers. They have feel isolated. They feel like they don't matter. Can this be undone? That's the question, isn't it? Have there been folks have, like gifted teachers who maybe reach out to a child that is feeling that they're on the outside or something? Yes, it can change the trajectory of a child's life, or an adult for that matter, to reach out with empathy and see that person. And peer pressure of kids mocking together. And yes, there are some developmental things that go on that peer pressure is a real issue, and they're looking to be part of a group. But then if we are challenging kids and holding up a compass of kindness and respect and gratitude and compassion, would a child think twice before they mocked someone? Mm-hmm. Maybe. maybe. And the dehumanizing that goes into creating a bully, and again, the brokenness and woundedness that creates that. We must work together as parents and as family members and as community members and as teachers to create a kinder environment and more respectful. And helping kids, this is another point too, Cheryl, is helping kids to process their feelings and the difficulty of criticism, and where do kids put their anger and feeling isolated and all those. Where do we help them process their feelings, which is called emotional intelligence?
Yes.
And it is just as important to teach as it's referred to as EQ. So we have IQ for math and science scores and things like that. That yes, those things are important, and so is the emotional development of our children, which is their EQ or their emotional intelligence. And just as important, can we help them process their feelings? And that's something that I also discovered. I think you'll be in simpatico with this. As performers, that's what we do. We are taught to process and to run emotions and to be the catalyst to be able to do that for the audience. We go into that. We explore it. We navigate those feelings. That great storytellers, that's what they do, and we as performers, that's how we are able to bring that forward. So in using theater skills, this is a disarming way to help kids to process. You mentioned improv. This is what I did for many summers with this. Well, we used improv. We created stories. We did the art of play. We were able to use those gifts for kids to unlock some of those hard to express and often awkward issues of being a kid and growing up. And now that you've added on top of that issues of kids feeling isolated from the pandemic and maybe social skills that they missed, these
and didn't develop.
Yes, it's kind of got stunted for a lot of kids. They didn't have the interaction with a lot of other kids, and I think the increasing levels of anxiety and depression that we are seeing is that a lot of folks feel isolated. So how do we change that? We change that by our own mindfulness and making sure that we are centered and not just reacting off of other people, that we've taken care of our own feelings and being in charge of that and responsible and accountable for that. But then it's also that deep breath in how we respond to people out in the world as well. Are we encouraging them or are we diminishing their spirit? We get to choose how we're going to move through the world and how we're going to react to people. And if we've goofed or we've been had a tough time, I was thinking about this morning in times that I have not been kind to other people. And I'd like to share one of them, because this is real for all of us, my friend. I don't want to be positioning myself as a saint, because I'm not. But I remember once being very curt and rude to a parking attendant right as I was rushing to get to an event. I'd been through LA traffic. Yes, it's frustrating. I made it all the way, and I was close to being late for a big event and so forth. And I was very short-tempered with this parking attendant.
You were teaching Master Keys for Kids.
Oh, Lord. Well, but I went into that event, and the whole time I'm sitting there going, why was I that way with that person? Oh my goodness. And then I came out from there looking for them, but they had gone home for the night. To this day, I regret that I was like that. However, I'm also learning to be more graceful with myself, because I then had to look a little deeper and go, why did I do that? So a level of personal accountability that is about how we move through the world. Well, I had to reflect on the fact that I had lost a very dear friend not that long before that in a very difficult way. I was still sad and grieving and angry. And I took that out on that person because I was detached from my feelings. I didn't quite understand. So now I send that person, whoever they are, thoughts of, I'm sorry, and forgiveness for myself that in my humanness, I took my stress and my grieving out on this other person. So now I catch myself more. If I'm feeling that, I have to stop, process it, look deeper, and go, oop, you're actually grieving. That's the source of why you are feeling short-tempered today. And I share that with everybody because there are reasons we do what we do. There are reasons that other people do what they do, things that we can't see. And good heavens, if it's hard to see it in yourself, it's really hard to see it in other people, especially if they're not conscious of why they're acting the way they are. So you said the word a little while ago, being grace-filled. Can we give the other words to that might hit being patient, and again, this is a different level of kindness, of breathing into it, and for everyone's humanness. And there's just, my friends, we have to take a breath now because our level of conflict is increasing by the day, and our dehumanizing of one another, and we're going off into corners, and we're pointing fingers at one another, and this because you did this, and you did this, and you did this, and we've got a world in pain. It's not sustainable. And when you even ask about why is this so important now? Okay, if we haven't answered that, just stop and think about the quality of life that you're creating for yourself and the quality of life that you are hopefully setting the stage for your children and everybody else's children.
I am so grateful that you shared that story. And first of all, that's a level of self-awareness that I think, truth be told, most people come to grips with their reality, whether it's the end of the night, the end of the day, the end of a year, whenever it is. And we're going to talk about your life as a masterpiece in a moment. For me, newsflash, it doesn't stop just because I'm self-aware of grown. I mean, I had an experience on a plane coming back from Florida. Same thing. I came home, Sandra, and I just was like, what? Where? I was in such a glowing space. I mean, I had a light around me because I was in my element around amazing, dynamic, creative, wonderful, accepting, affirming, encouraging people. And yet I did a bonehead thing that came from nowhere. But then I had to think about, where did that come from? And it came from a moment of fear. And that's why we talk about fear and moving into hope, because if we can address the fears we have, then maybe the behaviors behind them will not present themselves. So I hear all of what you're sharing, and it, of course, there's a reason why we need all of these tools now more so than ever. And I'm curious what your ultimate vision is for Master Keys for Kids, serving as the catalyst for a nationwide conversation on civility and ethical development.
I see this as facilitating that conversation. I see this as the precursor to us having both programming and public events and forums for us to be able to bring together vastly different views and sit across the table and
so important.
See each other. Now, I will say this is being done beautifully through a program called One Small Step through StoryCorps. And I really recommend that to everybody. Okay. If I've said the wrong title, I'm sorry. You'll I think it's called One Small Step. But what they do is they bring together a single person on either side of the table from polar opposite viewpoints, and they interview each other. And by the end of that conversation, they have learned a bit of the journey of the other person and mirror it back to that person. And it is extraordinary. And this is a microcosm of what we need to do. We certainly need to do this as nations. But it's all about doing this on a single one-on-one encounter in your everyday life. Start with you and listen. But that's what my vision is for that, is to open the conversation, facilitate it, bringing together schools and families to be able to put this out there of how important the emotional development and the processing of the feelings of our children and what that will do for them, creating a balanced adult. But I guarantee you that the bullies of childhood don't go away, my friends. They become the bullies in the office, and they become the bullies wherever. And the same premise is that they go on to be dictators.
Or presidents.
Well, I just want to give folks a vision for, make it personal. We are responsible for our own actions, but understand that reverberates out every day, and far larger than you could ever imagine, that you might say something to one person one day that could change the trajectory of their life. Doesn't mean you're going to know about it, but you know what? You will have walked through life in your moment to moment encounters that will be pleasant and sweet and gentle and lovely. And you string those together, you've got a pretty good life going on. That it's being gentle and kind to the person who's bagging your groceries, and you call them by name. Well, that's fun. That's pleasant. And then you hold a door for somebody who's having trouble getting out, carrying heavy packages. Well, that's pleasant. Okay, you smile at a child who maybe looks like they've had a bad day. That's nice. And that the day-to-day, those moment-to-moment encounters, you are creating also people responding to you that way. It coming right back to you, and it is instantaneously gratifying. That's why they say that the giver ends up being the one who really gets the gift. And that's what you're doing every time that you are kind to somebody. You might as well be handing them a small, beautifully wrapped box with no expectations of anything back. But odds are pretty good you're going to get a nice smile.
That is the key, is giving without expecting. And like you say, more times than not, the giver is the one who is really the recipient. And I appreciate you saying that, because conversely, you can think about the ripple effects of not being kind.
Well, and you're making a very valid point, because the opposite is true. If you're not being kind, you're being what? Oh, and if you're not being respectful, you're being what?
Yeah.
This is also just as valid a teaching tool with kids. I have a whole lot of fun with this. I have a character that's a troll. And the
yes, I've seen it in your videos.
Yeah,
and it really
he's a blast, and he is the art of what not to do. So we have some fun, and I will tell you that in the classroom, and I'm sharing this with you, everyone who's listening who's a parent or a grandparent, this is the best way to teach a child. Show them how not to do it. We had so much fun with this in the classroom. So like we did introductions with kids. I would ask for some volunteers, and then I'd put a baseball cap on and made sure that that was nice and low. And I would say, let's practice introductions with it. And then I'd take the hat off and look at them, give them eye contact, and then ask to meet them again. And I would ask the child, how does that feel? And they would say, well, one, I could look like you were hiding. It's like, yep. And the other one felt like you saw me. Yep. So now let's practice how not to do it. And the kids had so much fun with it. It works really well if you've got the stomach for it with table manners, because if you're teaching them how not to do it, you are showing them how to do something. It's, yeah.
You could also, I mean, the caveat or the disclaimer could be there is that one kid who goes, I kind of like the other.
In the law of cause and effect, it's like, yeah, that might be fun for you right now, my friend. And maybe this is the only time that you can do that. But understand that if you do that, you're not getting invited back.
Back to the party.
Oh,
yes.
Because I would, there were certain classes that I would come in and share with you, like the thank you note class. I would come in and ask, okay, who here likes to go to parties? Who likes to go on vacations? Who likes to get presents? Lots of presents. And of course, all the hands go up.
Yes,
and I'd say, you know what? You're going to get lots of all those things if you learn how to write a thank you note, because the person is going to know that you really mean it when you put it in writing and that you took the time to thank them. And guess what? You're going to get invited back. And if you don't think this is important, lots of people are discovering this when they apply for a job now, that 500 people might apply for that job, but the 2 people that sent a thank you note afterwards, guess who gets called back? So there are lots of reasons to be kind and respectful, but trust me, you're also doing yourself a favor, that because people stop giving if after time you don't show gratitude for it, and you're just assume that somebody should give you something again. Yeah, eventually those gifts either slow down or they stop, and there's a reason for that. So who does that actually hurt?
Yeah, I've actually been called in for second interviews or been called back for work because I did send a thank you note. I usually send thank you notes to my guests. Spoiler alert, you'll probably get one. And I had a woman who had been on probably 50 podcasts in the past couple of months. She's an author, and she said, I have never received a thank you note for being on someone's show. And that's not saying anything about other hosts. It just means that because usually it's the guest who would maybe want to do that. And I said, well, I just thank you for your time and sharing your story. But she said, it stood out. And so when you take that extra time and care, and you also said something years ago I've never forgotten, because I came from a family where my mom wrote, I mean, if it was Groundhog's Day, she sent a card, for goodness sake.
Good, that's coming up.
Yeah. Well, Mom would have to write from a very long ways away because she's no longer with us.
Bless your heart, and I had the pleasure of knowing her.
Yes, thank you. And then Mark's aunt took over that role in my life, because same way, she's just, and beautiful penmanship, gorgeous penmanship that, that's another story. It's not being taught in school anymore. But you said something that was so profound to me that I've never forgotten about. It's like, yes, we have texts. Yes, we have emails. But you're not going to go through a memory box of texts or emails. You're going to go through a memory box of cards and letters that has the person's persona, maybe their scent, their penmanship, their stamp, the date that they sent it, the cost of the stamp. I mean, you didn't go off into all that, but the whole thing about receiving a card from someone, that was your point of having a piece of that person.
Yes.
Long after they're gone.
Well, and this is why Madama comes to us from my character Madama comes to us from another century, is that she wants to make sure that we don't lose those sensibilities. And you and I still remember this, but there's a lot of modern kids that have never experienced this. And if they don't experience how meaningful that is, these things may be lost. So in some ways, I feel like I'm a preservationist in the regard of sensibilities that take our humanness and create that level of intimate connection that is our manners. We kind of need another word for it, because I think some people discount that, but so much of the breakdown of our relationships is simply crummy manners, not being respectful of one another, and not being kind. And so I encourage kids even to write notes, handwritten notes to their siblings. One of our assignments was and I invite any of the listeners to do the same with their wee ones, is folks who never get thank you notes. The garbage man, the postal person. Yeah. Imagine how that would lift their spirits. I'll tell you, I never knew what happened with it, but once upon a time I was sitting on a jury for a very difficult case. And I was so impressed in our court system of the decorum is one thing, but it was the fact that this person who had done some really heinous things was still afforded dignified behavior and treatment, I should say. And I wrote the judge a thank you note of what it meant to me in my trust in the system and in the quality of our ethics, that we still will treat that person with respect and dignity. And that is deeply important.
I love that you did that, by the way.
I just felt strongly in the moment. I of course, I don't know what happened with that. I have a sneaky suspicion that thank you note might be in the top drawer of that judge's desk, and that when they're feeling low, they might look at that and go,
I am making a difference.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And yes, Cheryl, I would ask the kids, because they would say, well, can't I just email it? Can't I text it? Say, yeah, you can text a thank you or something like that, but it will be received with, that took you 2 seconds to do.
2 seconds. Yes.
And they put how much time into giving you that gift? If you sit down and take the time to do that, they will know that you are really thankful. And that's going to go up on their refrigerator. It's going to go in a place of honor and mean something to them over and over. And that kindness is going to reverberate. And guess who's going to get a better gift next year?
Well, you see, that's the end result.
Not that that's the motivating factor, kids. Don't hear me that way. But although it could happen, but it's not the motivator. But nonetheless, you're choosing a better way of life. And so I would ask the kids, okay, how many of you have kept cards and letters from your grandparents? The number of hands will go up. How many of you kids have lost your grandparents and you kept those cards because it's a piece of them and it's a reminder of their love for you? Oh, that carries a different weight.
Yes, it does.
And now those few moments that it takes to do that gesture has a deep meaning for people. It's the same thing. I have a book on making apologies in the Manner for All Seasons series, and I am writing a book right now on loss for children, where we will be teaching how to, among other things, of how to write a condolence note.
Ooh,
And my
good.
friends,
That's a good
it's
one.
deeply, deeply important. Those handwritten condolence notes and being able to put your feelings on there, that means the world to people. And it has deepened a number of my friendships by taking the moment and sending that. People don't forget those things. They don't forget those things. And the level of your friendship just went to another
A
depth.
deeper level.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And Sandra, there's so many other directions and conversations we can have in the midst of this, and maybe we'll come back when you release some more in your series. We're coming to the close of our time, but I want to ask you a couple of more questions, because in the midst of all of this, it can seem such a daunting task what you're doing, a beautiful and important one, but yet daunting. And so I'm wondering what makes you hopeful.
That's a spectacular question. Do I have my days of doubt? You bet. Is this watch the news? Is it do you come
No,
up?
thank you.
Well, I just mean
Yes, yes.
it's
Yeah,
there's
I knew
so
what you
much
meant. Yes.
pain for people, so much pain, and it does feel daunting. And then I go to Trader Joe's and I buy something and I smile at the baby sitting in the little stroller in front of me, and I go,
Mm,
yeah, that's why we do it,
yes.
because it's our quality of life. And so you move forward by what comes into your sphere of influence and what you're responsible for. So
Ooh, say that
I'm
again.
happy to do that, because people often judge their own journeys by, oh, I should be doing these big grandiose things. It's like, no, not necessarily. What are you responsible for? Who
Yes.
comes across
Ooh.
your path? Who are you connected to, or could you reach out to? That's your sphere of influence. You have a choice. Do you want to be kind and respectful and elevate their spirit, help them to feel better about themselves? Or are you going to be the person who is critical or mocking and diminishes or crushes their spirit? You get to choose. Will you have opened a door with that person? Will you have closed a door with that person? But in all frankness, you are also choosing day to day the quality of your own life on these tiny, tiny choices that you make moment to moment, including with your own family, and making little choices there that are just sweet. Oh, help your mom with dinner. Oh, okay. Carry the groceries in. Yeah. Hold the door for that person. It's those sweetness of encounters, and they grow and they change and they make a difference of how you move through the world, and that's what you're responsible for.
That's my second amen. So that's my bookend to the amen. Sandra, if there was a soundtrack to your life, what would be on it and why?
What would be on it? Why? Oh, don't worry. Be happy.
Happy? Yes. Yes. You're the second person to say that.
Am I?
And I think it's a theme, especially now. Don't worry.
I get to choose, don't
You
I?
get to choose. There it
I
goes
get to
along with the
choose.
choice.
I get to choose. And you know what? I also get to choose, if I've goofed, how to say I'm sorry. I get to choose and not let it go. Um, my book on apologies is very helpful in that, and doing them in writing means that you really mean it for people. But yeah, your day-to-day encounters, my friends, and may I also say, it's how you're going to model it for your children. Maybe you're short-tempered with a clerk. Well, your kids are watching.
Yes, they are.
How what are you going to do about it? Maybe you walk out of the store and you're putting your groceries in the car and you go, wow, I feel kind of bad about that. Stop, go back in with your child, apologize. I'm sorry. Please know that.
So important. So
Can you
important.
imagine what you would teach that child by them seeing you
Yes.
do that, and your humanness and you forgiving yourself, and volumes you would be teaching that child. But but in everything that we do, the conversations in our homes, how we talk to people, the waiter, how do
Oh, yes.
how
As a former waitress,
yes,
yes, I will.
but that's a big
Yes.
one because your kids are at the table and they're watching and they're learning how people should be, how they should carry themselves, how what their actions, how that affects the table next to them, how that, but in certainly in how you treat other people. That's probably the biggest lessons that you are giving them is they are watching you model certain behavior. So you get to choose what are you going to teach that child.
There is a great song in the musical Into the Woods,
Mm,
and one of my
I
favorite
know what you're going to
lyrics,
say.
"Children will listen. Children will
Yeah.
listen, positively or negatively," and that's where it begins at a very micro level of how we interact and treat each other because children will listen, and maybe the people on television or on social media, they're out there, but what about the people surrounding us,
Yes.
and what are they absorbing? So, before we go and you share with how people can get a hold of you, is there something else you'd like to talk about as it relates to this time in your life?
Thank you. I have a YouTube show that is just now mounting called A Moment for Manners. Then all the episodes are 3 minutes or less, and they are fun to sit down with kids and see something and go practice it. So one of them might be on napkins, and you might have fun going and helping your kids with that. I'm having a lot of fun making them up too because I think storytelling and humor are the two best teaching tools.
Oh, yes,
So
yes.
have fun, my friends, in being able to lighten it up and help your kids learn to be balanced human beings. And I'm looking forward to being able to get more into that and doing lots of the creations of more stories. And the book that I'm working on now on Loss for Children should be coming out later this year. And if you want to go to masterkeysforkids.com, you can be abreast of when that's going to come out. And it's very much on our mind for the way that we opened this show of so many friends going through enormous loss right now. And how do we help our kids process that? And while we're at it, how do we process it ourselves?
Just because there was something on your what is the name of the book again that you're writing?
It will be called Lost and Found. It'll
Okay.
have several stories on different ways to approach loss for children.
Loss for Children. Okay. Thank you, Sandra, and I will have it in your show notes, but what is the best way for people to get a hold of you if they wanna reach out to you?
Thank you. Would be to go to my website, masterkeysforkids.com. And you can, if you need to, you can just do Sandra at masterkeysforkids.com, and that'll come directly to me.
And I might add, when you were talking about your YouTube series, you do all the illustrations, correct?
I do. It's so much fun. It's just
That's
so
a lot
much
of
fun.
work, my dear.
Well,
It's a lot of
it
work.
is, but that's something that did not come to me till about 10 years ago. And that is a whole nother funny story of how I was so sure that I could not draw and couldn't do all these things. And
You proved yourself wrong.
this
That's
little artist came forward and said, "Hey, what about me?"
I love it. I love it, and it just shows to go you that we may be getting older, but that doesn't mean that we're not creative and growing and having things come to us, and we didn't even really touch upon it next time of your life as a masterpiece, which we will do.
Oh,
You'll
that's
have to
kind
come
of you.
back. We'll chat some more. But this has been a delight, and I think a conversation I couldn't think of a better one to start out this new year with in light of everything that's going on, because whether it's the fires in LA or political or, we could go on and on and on, kindness and civility and manners are what is going to make the difference in the midst of all this chaos.
Yeah,
So
thank you, Cheryl, for offering this forum, a healthy place for people to come and to learn and discover and share. Thank you for what you do.
you are so welcome. And thank you, Miss Sandra Beckwith. You go shake some keys,
Sounds good.
open some doors.
Open some doors.
Open, open. It's like the old
Yes.
commercial. Open, open, open. I love you, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your kindness. Thank you, everyone who's listening.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I'd also like to thank the following news outlets for the use of their clips: BBC, PBS, Now This, UNESCO, and Some Good News. Theme music used with permission by Joel and Luke Smallbone, otherwise known as the group for King and Country. If you'd like to offer feedback or a story idea, email me at 19stories@soundsatchelstudios.com, via my website at cherylhalling.com, or follow me on Instagram at cherylhallingvo. I look forward to sharing more stories on the next episode of 19 Stories from Fear to Hope. Until then, stay healthy and hopeful.
Together with our differences, together we are bolder, braver, stronger.